like actually we have a question. So we want to address some questions in the chat too, of course. So Greg is asking, how does Compass address the challenge of repo sprawl across multiple teams and tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's quite a loaded question, I would say. I've seen a lot of teams, bigger enterprises with tens of thousands of repositories, and that's a big pain point because then you have all of these teams, you need to have all this organization, and then you end up with who's responsible for what. So I've seen this problem before, and this is where Compass comes in as a perfect solution to organize and orchestrate that process of repository sprawl. So what you can use within inside of Compass to basically organize that is you can use the custom fields, component types. Those are the two biggest ways to do it. And then you can actually start filtering by the repository. And of course, ownership's a huge thing within inside of Compass. So what we do is we attach a team to a repository so people start understanding actually who actually owns what. And I know it sounds really simple, but when you're in these large enterprises who have big sets of repositories, this process is really hard to organize. So that's how I've seen it before, and I've seen Compass actually go in and start alleviating some of those pains of the sprawling repository. But then it's when you start evolving above that and you start using the templating feature within inside a Compass. So the templating feature allows you to set a criteria for a repository, and basically you can use this template and you can start introducing a workflow where you're just creating repositories from templates. And I've seen the webhook be super useful, specifically towards automations, such as enforcing permissions, making a workflow. So templates are the way to start streamlining that process again. And also another way to start tracking that governance and the adoption rate is through the scorecards. So I can start putting them on top of these repositories, aligning the governance. So in total, that's how I deal with repository sprawl. And I think that that's a big pain point that we're seeing. Nowadays, there's a lot of these companies who have no idea how to deal with this problem. So there's a microservices architecture essentially, and that's most companies nowadays, and that's a very effective way to deal with software components. So I think nowadays more than ever, this is so important for you to implement for your company, because nowadays every company is a tech company. They have
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Riley. And, from an engagement perspective, it's always the folks with very large development teams who are they have a very mature development organization. They are the best candidates for Compass, right? And that's where you bring Forge in, right? Because if you have a large development team, they're used to customizing their tech stack. They're used to building new internal apps. Bring Compass in with Atlassian Forge, Atlassian serverless app development platform. You can now extend this customization, this transparency with scorecards, not only to your Atlassian products in your repos like Bitbucket, GitHub, GitLab, but also take it a step further and start bringing metrics from components all across the business and leveraging all those great features of Compass that way. So I really love the way you explain that, Riley. It looks like we have another question here. How can Compass facilitate better collaboration between development, DevOps, and product teams? Another loaded question from Greg there.
Yeah, and also going back to Forge, I just wanted to plug in our quick app that we actually built for Compass. We've been seeing that a lot of people have a trouble getting started with Compass just because it's a new concept, it's a new way of working. We like to call Compass a transformation because you're transforming the way that people and processes work. So what we've done is we, in collaboration with Apps Delivered and Await.ai, we made our own Compass app, which is a AI assistant to help you get started. So if you're wanting to check out how you can utilize more features in Compass, we also have some suggested questions that you can ask. Please do check out our app built on Atlassian Forge. But let me get back to that question. So how can Compass facilitate better collaborations between development, DevOps, and product teams? That's a good question. I think that's really important because in terms of when you're actually implementing Compass, you start to realize more data that's now visible to your teams so they can collaborate better. So I'm really excited about when Atlassian Forge comes into, sorry, Atlassian Rovo comes into this, because you'll start being able to surface so much data that a lot of companies nowadays aren't surfacing. I've worked in a lot of development teams in my experience, and I could tell you one thing: trying to figure out who owns what, how it works is so difficult. So it's so important to actually go and have this process where you're starting to define who owns what. And for instance, there's an incident, something goes down, there's a lot of different parts of the microservices ecosystem. Starts to becoming really important to start understanding, because I've been in development teams, I've been on the DevOps side, I've been on the product teams, and trying to figure out the correct answer to how something works is so difficult. Because a lot of what happens is, let's say AWS, you have Amazon, you have Spotify. These are large companies. They have lots of different technology, and they rely on other parts of the technology in the business. And so by defining that criteria, how it actually works, teams can communicate better, they can understand better, they could self-help themselves when they have a problem. So what I think is how the answer to that question is by implementing Compass and being able to document your processes, your teams are able to work more agile and more independently and work together. And another thing that I like about Compass is change management. So when I'm going to make a change to my component, everybody else is notified when and what's going to get changed. Because a lot of teams nowadays, they don't have a proper change management process, especially for these componentized pieces. So when teams end up making changes, it starts affecting other things. It gets very complicated. So I think by being able to implement Compass, add all that metadata, add all the important metrics, enhance the governance is so effective to increase collaboration across teams, including DevOps, development, product teams. So in summary, that's my answer to it. What do you think, Zach? How do you think this enhanced collection of data and metrics that we're grabbing will be important in the ecosystem? I know we talked about Rovo. We talked about other tools within the Atlassian suite. How do you find surfacing that information? And in your experience, maybe by tools like Confluence, how has that personally helped you in finding information and self-servicing yourself?
And I see your question there, Brian, and I'll touch on this really quickly. I think anytime you're enabling the employees of your organization to find information more quickly, that's a win. So I don't know if folks have seen, but McKinsey actually conducted a study that the average knowledge worker spends about 1.8 hours searching for information a day. Okay, so this is extending across. You're trying to find something in Confluence, you're trying to find something in Jira, you're trying to find something in Jira Service Management. But I'm keen to believe that this also translates to a development environment. And Riley, you would definitely know more than me, but I know people struggle with finding things. And from the conversations I've had with stakeholders that have large development teams, it's the same thing. People are struggling to find who owns what, who do I contact during an incident, what do I do to get this new repo created? There's so many different moving parts that go into all of your development components that if we can just decrease the time that it takes to find information and metadata around those components, it's going to mean huge return on investment for the business, right? Huge classical ROI example there. And we have a question from Brian. We know Brian, great Atlassian creator, wonderful Atlassian community leader. Thanks for joining, Brian. So he's asking, what's the opportunity for marketplace vendors who do work on engineering productivity tools to bring some of their metrics directly into Compass? And I'll let you touch on that one, Riley.
Yeah, Service Rocket actually released a great app, which actually shows a big use case, especially around marketplace vendors. It basically can give you that how many star ratings that you actually have on your application. So if there's other metrics that are improving around that component, for instance, build times, for instance, you have developer productivity metrics, the good old Dora metrics. So you can correlate those metrics, let's say the star ratings in the marketplace, to actual development metrics. I think that's a great app that shows a great use case around specifically what a component can directly be. A component is a dynamic piece that then, if anything goes wrong in this piece, that is going to have a downstream effect. So I've seen that great use case from Service Rocket. I like their app. I highly recommend you check out that. But then you could start correlating your metrics together. And I think that's my base answer to that. Zach, what are you thinking in terms of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that touches back onto what I spoke of previously of connecting these metrics to other components in the business or bringing data from your business level components into Compass. But I think that that's a really great use case, the way you're actually connecting developer productivity metrics to tangible outcomes that directly correlate to revenue. So I could see a big ecosystem of apps that are just taking these developer metrics that we get, all this great metadata we can now get from Compass, and just correlating that to your traditional KPIs that every business tracks. We're starting there with just star ratings. I think just off the top of my head, there's tons of other avenues that we can go there to correlate these metrics with traditional business functions. So that's my take on that.
And
Yep,
one
go ahead.
more additional follow-up to that, Zach. So we build our apps in a certain way. So we have data center apps, we have cloud apps, we have our own special formula. So what we do is we take these formulas and basically we make them into templates. So then we don't have to recreate the wheel every single time that we're making a new app. Then that's going to drive us more productivity and enhanced governance over our repositories. Coming from a marketplace vendor perspective, we also have a side of the business that is a marketplace vendor. So what we've found is enhancing or every metric that's important to us, we want to track. We use Compass ourselves. So the star ratings is one, but for example, we want to see how many unit tests, what's the unit test percentage. We want to see how much TypeScript's used. We want to see no any types using TypeScript. So how we enforce that is we make these Bitbucket repositories using Compass templates. So every time it's enforcing the same standards, and then we could start reporting on top of those with scorecards. So yeah, Brian, that's a great insight, great thought. We've actually had the thought ourselves when Compass originally got released. We were thinking, how can we utilize Compass to enhance our productivity and our developer productivity? So that's a great question.
Yeah, and Brian said, okay, so to reverse it, we could use Forge and give our customers that same opportunity with our metrics, the ones that we're generating and providing to them. That's really great. Yeah,
Yeah,
great point there,
absolutely.
Brian.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And now we have another question from Greg. What makes scorecards useful, Riley? And I think you just touched on that, but if you could expand a little bit, that'd be wonderful.
Well, I think scorecards are very, very important way to actually utilize Compass. So you get all the information in there, you get all the metadata in there, but how are you making sure teams are being held responsible for updating their metadata? So scorecards allow you to enforce governance throughout your Compass ecosystem. So by enforcing governance, we can make sure that some components have a certain criteria and we can report on top of them the most important metrics for us. So with scorecards, you can basically set a criteria for a metric. So when I set this criteria for the metric and I weigh it against all other criterias, it shows me which components are in good health, which components are in bad health. As a DevOps manager or a development lead, I want to start looking into some of those metrics that are maybe failing, and I might want to keep my eyes a little bit further away the things that are all good. So I think scorecards are super important to ensuring governance throughout your Compass ecosystem. And it also can be used for implementing Compass as well. Because what we've found to be a great formula is when we get all those components in there and we get everything right in there, we identify what's our components, what components do we want to report on. Well, this is the next step to ensuring that everything is in the proper criteria that we want. And the great thing about scorecards is you can essentially start making them different based on different component types. So a big one is also custom component types. So they have a library of components within Compass, but then you could start making your own custom ones. And I've seen at larger enterprise companies, this is important to have certain naming conventions per teams. So it's a team API and how they might work and how the components might be reported on in terms of a scorecard standpoint might be completely different. So being able to decide which component type are you reporting on and which scorecards are applied to those components are very important as well. Each team works differently. So scorecards are extremely useful for not only ensuring governance within the Compass, but also reporting on all of your components and the criteria. So I think that's my answer. What are your thoughts on scorecards, Zach? What is your outlook?
Yeah, I think you would know more than me about, typical scorecards use cases. But just from what I've heard, just tracking the health of these components, tracking metrics that aren't typically tracked is going to be the biggest value add there. Anytime you can do that in the business, there's going to be a return on investment. And that's why we're so obsessed with you enterprise customers out there who are using Atlassian Analytics, because we just think it is one of the best BI tools that can not only bring in all these great metrics from your Atlassian products, but also metrics across the business for dashboards and reports that are actually useful to the C-suite. So I just look at scorecards as another way that I can collect useful metrics for my team. And I think since we only have 5 minutes left here, Riley, I want to look into the future a little bit. I'm a new user or somebody who's interested in Compass. I've already been sold on the value of Compass, this classical ROI, reducing the time spent searching for metadata around my components. And I want to actually start implementing Compass. What do I have to worry about? What do you think? What are the challenges I'll run into? Who are the people I have to get involved? What do the steps look like if I want to take Compass and actually get some value out of it?
Absolutely. And I think this is a huge question on everyone's mind. They could see the use cases, they could see the value, but how do they go and start implementing this? So I think it's really important to look at it like a traditional ITSM implementation, because it's really difficult to get this up and running. But when it's up and running, the ROI is absolutely massive. So what I've seen is teams that don't have a specific lead on the project, people who are actually actively only focusing on cataloging and ensuring the governance inside of Compass is the number one thing that I would recommend. You have to have a team who's only focused on this. And I'm sure everybody knows with traditional ITSM asset management, this is a similar process. People in why I've seen teams struggling with understanding why that's so important is because microservices, components, it's a new concept. It's a new way of working. It's a transformation. So by understanding the traditional ROI that you can get out of actually utilizing Compass and making a component catalog, then you go to the next step, and it's you need a team who's focused on solely implementing this product. Okay, I'm talking to the teams, I'm training the teams, I'm coaching people how to use the product, I'm setting up scorecards, I'm setting up templates. And this is a time consuming task, but you have to look at the end of the day, how much ROI are you going to gain by actually implementing Compass? So if you understand the use case, you understand the ROI, get a team on it, get a lead on it, and have them start cataloging everything. I understand it's a new concept, it's a transformation, but that's what I would recommend for customers.
Oh, yeah. And like you said, it's a transformation. If somebody is seriously thinking about Compass, they have to be a mature development organization in some way or another. So most people, most clients that I've worked with, they're not doing this to play around. They understand the value of this product. They understand the value of a developer experience platform, and they're typically ready to take the next step, but they just need to be shown the way. Similar to how, if you want to even think about implementing Jira Align and going the scaled agile way, you should probably have a very mature agile organization before you even think about using that product. I think Compass, and it goes in with the theme of having a large development team to get the true value. Very mature development organizations are going to be looking at Compass, and I think they have the skills in the personnel to get the full value and all the ways that you can import components very easily. Atlassian is constantly coming out with new ways to populate the component catalog. It's going to make it easier and easier for organizations to adopt Compass and see ROI with, I think, within the first 3 to 6 months, in my opinion, and I've seen it myself. Okay, so Riley, we only got 1 minute here. In the last minute, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining our Atlassian Compass overview webinar. Like I said, my name is Zach. I'm the customer engagement manager at Atlas Bench. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about Compass. We're also offering some free Compass training sessions at the moment. So if your team is struggling with your implementation of Compass, feel free to come in, contact me, and we'll show you how to get started and get that ROI. And I'll leave it to you, Riley, maybe if you want to close out.
Paul, I appreciate everybody showing up, the great questions. I'm really excited about the Compass opportunity, what it can transform for your business. I appreciate everybody for showing up. I'm Riley Venable again, the Atlassian Practice Manager. So I can help you implement Compass and help you find out a strategy that's going to unlock this ROI. So Zach, close it up.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Appreciate it.